walking into that dark red room by yourself where you're like, how am I going to do? I have no idea what's happening. And Barry's is a little bit hard to figure out the first time. And I just fell in love with it right away. I loved how you could measure your success by how hard you worked, right? Like, I loved that. I would watch my speeds get faster and faster. And the idea of sprinting at 10 miles an hour when I started for a minute were like, I can't, right? And Barry's quickly taught me, like in a matter of weeks, that the word can't shouldn't even exist as it relates to you and your potential, your body, etc. I just went and I had the best time and met the most incredible people and felt that sense of community.
All right, you're listening to Hawk Talk. I'm here today with Joey Gonzalez. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. So, I assume the day you're born, you're in the delivery room and you just start getting everyone to do burpees, right? That's how this started and it just went from there.
That's exactly right. I
Yeah.
was breached, so I came out red hot.
Yeah, exactly. You came out feet first, jumped down, got
Yeah.
into a deep squat. That was it.
Yeah. I was ready.
Perfect. So yeah, where are you from originally, by the way?
I grew up in Chicago, outside of Chicago in the suburbs.
And so tell me a little bit about childhood. Like, were your parents super active people? Did you grow up around that environment, or like what was childhood like?
Uh, you know, I so I was probably the least athletic person of my entire family.
Nice.
My brother and sister were, in every sport you can imagine.
Mhm.
My mom at one point was running marathons. My dad would go to the gym for like 2 hours a day.
Uh-huh.
And I just loved watching TV and eating pizza, which, you know, could have better habits than that. And I really grew up just loving like the arts,
Uh-huh.
theater shows, etc. And so that really is, I think, where my passion and my heart was in
Uh-huh.
my childhood.
Yep.
Um, so I grew up, a very homogenous part of the Chicago suburbs.
Mhm.
I was Latin, kind of discovering my sexuality. I was like different in every way you can imagine. My
Yep.
parents are both immigrants. So it was a
Where are they from?
challenging. My dad was a refugee from Cuba,
Okay,
and my mom from southern Italy.
got it.
Yeah.
And so, what landed them in Chicago?
It was my dad's practice. He fled to Spain for medical school and then eventually did his residency in Georgia and then got a job at a hospital in Chicago.
And
And my mom,
what
what
kind of
was
doctor?
that?
What kind of doctor was?
Pathology.
Uh-huh.
So it's an interesting story, and he's such a source of inspiration for me because obviously you have to be so smart and sharp and driven.
Yeah.
And pathologists tend to be like even more cerebral than the average
Yeah.
doctor. But what was really cool about my dad is that he not only had his like hospital 9 to 5 job, but he also opened up cytology labs across the Chicagoland area.
Hmm.
And he did so with, this is like so nuanced, but like with a group of Cuban pathologists.
Oh wow.
So it taught me so much about taking risks,
Yep.
betting it all, right? Entrepreneurship, but
Yep.
also this idea of like finding your community and
Yep.
growing something with your friends and people you care about.
I think there's so much to that. I mean, I think people discount the value of community and having people that you can inherently trust around you, and what that can create is huge.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, let's go back to like sort of the early years, like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Was that like when did you get into theater and the arts? Like when did that really start to kick off?
I'd say I loved it always, but more
Yeah.
as a spectator.
Uh-huh.
When I was 13, I was actually on the football team. I was
Oh,
not very good.
okay.
I played a lot. I played soccer. I did a lot. I was a pretty good swimmer. That was like probably my best sport. And then later on, I did volleyball and was really great at that. But I was on the football team and just kind of living the conventional high school life
Hmm.
and heard about an audition downtown Chicago for a musical called Falsetto Land and asked my mom if she'd take me. And she was like slightly annoyed and just still trying to be supportive. And she's like, he's not going to book it, so I'll just take him, and he can have this audition.
Yeah.
And I got there and I was so nervous because the kid from like Les Mis who just got back on tour was there, and it was just like a whole scene. And I was fish out of water, and I ended up booking the job,
Wow.
and it was a very, very hard work. I had to, obviously quit football. I was actually leaving school many days, at half day to go down, rehearse, do my homework. I was up late. Just really taught me the value of hard work, but also
Mhm.
that being integrated with having fun when your hard work is something that you love so much. So
Yeah.
it was one of the best times of my life, and also felt like, because of who I was identity wise and what I was going through, felt very much accepted by this very urban downtown lifestyle of everybody who was older than me, gay, straight, like all just a very diverse. I grew up going to Catholic school, so everyone was pretty much
Yeah.
wired the same. So gave me like an incredible rite of passage experience, and that
Yeah.
led me to get an agent, and I did film and TV for like the next 10 years of my life.
And so to get that gig, did you have any training or did you have like prior experience, or was it just like you were just naturally gifted and you got
I
that? Yeah.
Well, it was a musical. I had been in like voice lessons for a while.
Okay.
And then I would say the performance acting piece was more raw. That was like more just, I think, naturally gifted. But like when I did the audition, the guy who cast me was laughing afterwards because he's like, "You were standing there with like your hand on like I was such a dork. Like I was holding my diaphragm and like making sure." So I just was not as seasoned, I'm sure, as a lot of the other kids, but they saw something in me, um, that they really liked.
Yeah. And what was your parents' reaction, like, and your family's reaction with, like,
Yeah,
as you said, your mom kind of drove you there, expected nothing of it, maybe was half annoyed. Like, once you got this, were they just super supportive and like, this is amazing? Or
yeah. I mean, I would say my mom always worried about us fitting in. Not so much my brother and sister because they just were,
they did?
you
Yeah.
know, excellent at academic sports. So I think she was a little bit worried about like the social dynamics of me removing myself from high school and
Yeah.
working outside of high school and establishing like this career that would take me out of school and miss things like homecoming, etc. My
Yeah.
dad was obsessed and came
Huh.
and attended like half the shows and cried
Wow.
every night. And my dad is very into the theater arts. That was something that like we shared growing up.
Huh.
He and I would go to the movies all the time together.
That's amazing. And so, for your dad, was that something? I mean, obviously, the guy went through a lot. Getting out of Cuba, going to Italy. I mean, I always think of that the reverse. My grandparents were refugees from Europe during World War
Oh
II,
yeah.
and so I always think of like, like now that I'm adult, I have kids. Like, literally, at one day, just picking everything up and going to another country where you don't even speak the language necessarily, or maybe trying to. It's like that experience to then see your kid actually succeeding and doing something great has got to be so rewarding. Is that what drove that partially? Obviously you shared that, but I'm sure that had to be part of it with your dad.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that, and also I think himself always had it in him. Like I remember he would talk about this like singing contest he won when he was
Yeah.
8, and you know, I think there was like a piece of him that always wanted to be involved in the arts, and this was his ticket in.
Love that. Got it.
Yeah.
And so you get this gig, you get an agent. Was it like right away you got the gig, so then an agent was interested and you started
It
looking?
was actually opening night, and it was quite dramatic because I was hired to be the understudy for the kid that had been cast already, who had a pretty significant resume.
Yeah.
But after we started doing rehearsals, they pivoted and said it's now a shared role. And then, like a few weeks in, they announced who was doing opening night, and it was me and not him. And it was like the whole thing,
I gotta, yeah.
navigating that,
Yeah, I was gonna
the
say how
politics
was
of that.
yeah.
But I obviously was thrilled, and it was that being able to do opening night changed my life because that's when press and everybody was there, and
Yeah,
that's when I signed.
got it. And so how long did that run, that show?
It was about 3 or 4 months.
Okay. And then did you go right into TV, other shows?
Yeah,
Like, did you just take off from there? Got it.
yeah.
And so what kind of, you said over the next decade, so you said you were 13 then. So from 13 to 23, I mean, you finished high school, I assume, but then you just kind of stuck with this. And how was that
Yeah,
decade?
I went to USC to study
Okay.
theater and minored in film TV, and was really committed to that career.
Yeah.
But having the parents that I have and having the sort of work ethic that I have,
Mhm.
I was really burning out on just doing so many classes, rehearsing so much for every audition and scene, and noticed that, like, this is obvious, but that the fruits of your labor in this particular career did not necessarily sync up with how hard you worked.
Yeah.
It's really about right time, right place, knowing the right people and the connections. And so that was really frustrating to me. And I started to become disenchanted. And by like 23, 23, 24 or so,
Yeah.
was like, I need to find something else. Don't think I fully sort of sunset that dream until I did find something else, but
Yeah.
that was what led me to start
And
looking.
so during that like prior period, like talk about what are some of the things you did? Like you said, you got some TV shows and stuff. What kind of like gigs did you land throughout that 10-year period?
Oh, so some local stuff. I was on a kid show on WGN called The Magic Door. There was a TV show called The Untouchables,
Mhm.
and I would play Elliot Ness in the flashbacks, which was so cool because
Yeah.
that's like one of my favorite time periods.
Mhm.
And I'd ride like a, wooden bike in my
Yeah.
knickers and just like my like paperboy cap. It was a really fun show to do. Um, I did a movie called Matinee with John Goodman and Kathy Moriarty, which was actually about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then just a lot of commercials and
Got it.
other things. Yeah.
Nice. And so you actually, so you did go through high school, finish high school, go to college. Did you finish your degree at SC as well?
Yeah.
Nice. And so,
I would
yeah,
not have been allowed to not finish any
yeah,
degree that I
yeah,
started.
probably a good thing. And so you get to this 24 years old, you're burned out, you don't see the sort of work reward balance there. What do you did you just that day just be like, I'm gonna go look for something else? Like, how did that process go for you?
Oh, it was a couple years.
Okay.
I tried a couple different jobs and didn't find anything that I loved
What kind
until
of
I
stuff?
stumbled on berries.
Yeah. And what kind of stuff did you try first?
Um, so I always loved the body. So I became trained as a massage therapist, but then
Uh-huh.
realized I didn't want to spend my time massaging other people. I preferred to
Yeah.
get massaged. Even though if like I knew someone and I wanted to help them in some
Yeah.
way, like that would be okay. But um, I did the stereotypical waiting tables. I was a real estate salesperson.
Yeah.
I worked corporate sales at a resort. So I
Uh-huh.
did a lot of different things.
Got it. And then, yeah, how long until you stumbled upon berries?
Uh, I I believe it was 2004. So it was probably just a few years after I graduated, and I had heard about berries for
Uh-huh.
a couple years,
Yeah.
but I was just finding myself in terms
Uh-huh.
of like athletics. I just started to work out in my early 20s,
Mhm.
and so I believe it was like one of my it's actually a hookup, embarrassingly enough, that finally got to me to go because one
That-
morning it was like a challenge, and I was like, "Oh, fuck, I can't say no. Now I have to go." So that's how I went. When I got there, it just was so funny. There's this like barrier to entry for berries where um, there are a lot of choices out there. Back then there wasn't, but there are a lot of choices out there in terms of what to do for a workout, and a lot of them aren't hard, and berries is.
Yep. Yep.
It's also a place where we've tried really hard to make it for everyone. So you don't have to. You can do your best and get through it
Yeah.
and still feel great.
And there's some
Um,
natural push that happens. Obviously, I've done berries a bunch like that. It's
yeah,
like you push yourself to your limit, and like yeah, you might not be running 18 on the treadmill like the guy next to you, but you're
yeah,
pushing yourself because you see that. You're like, well, I can at least do 10 or 11 or 12, that kind of thing. So
that's right. There's so many layers of accountability that don't exist alone
right.
at the gym.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, when I took class and showed up, I just was really surprised at how friendly everyone was. walking into that like dark red room by yourself where you're like, how am I going to do? I have no idea what's happening. And berries is a little bit hard to figure out the first time. I'd
Yep.
say it takes like two or three where you're like, okay, now I get it, you know?
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with it right away. I loved um, how, obviously this theme for me, but like how you could measure your success by how hard you worked, right?
Yep.
Like I
Yeah.
loved that. I would watch my speeds get faster and faster. And the idea of sprinting at 10 miles an hour when I started for a minute were like, I can't, right?
Yeah.
And berries quickly taught me, like in a matter of weeks, that the word can't shouldn't even exist as it
Yeah.
relates to you and your potential, your body, et cetera. So um, that's all it took. I just went and I had the best time and met the most incredible people and felt that sense of, community.
Yeah. Which it really seems to have built. So you obviously went as a customer first. How,
I
how
did,
did
yeah.
that start to pivot into maybe I could come work here?
I just was going a lot. I was going like
Yeah.
twice a day,
Oh, wow.
and had been like on my like nutrition as well. So I was like turning into a fitness person without
Yeah.
necessarily like, it wasn't necessarily the most mindful transition, but it was happening just naturally because
Yeah.
once you commit to a workout, it just starts to spill into other areas of your life.
And did it kick
And
in right away after that first session? Was it just like, I love this, I'm coming back as much as possible? Or was it like a slow
yeah,
ramp? It was, yeah.
I think the I love this was immediate. I think it was
Okay.
a slow ramp to going twice a day.
Yeah,
That
fair.
wasn't
Yeah.
immediate. Yeah.
Yeah, that might, you
Uh,
might get injured. Just started going
yeah.
twice a
Yeah.
day. You can ramp to that.
Um,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, and it was Barry who, because I was there so often, Barry was like, you should be a trainer here. And so immediately I was like 100% I'm in. And um, the first class I taught, it was I remember going home um, and telling my now husband, like, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life.
Wow.
It was that quick. It was the
Yeah, I
first
would say.
time I taught.
What was it? What was it about that? What was it about
I
the
think
training? I know you love the class, but what was it about being on the other side, so to speak?
I think it was just the power of our vision statement is to transform lives worldwide. Um, and one of the reasons why that's our vision statement is that's exactly what Barry's did for me and so many other members of our leadership team, so many of our clients, so many of our employees across every sort of population.
Yeah.
And being a part of something that powerful helped me kind of see through the trees. I was like, this is because there was no boutique fitness.
Yeah.
This was not an emerging industry. This
Yeah.
was a one-off. Barry was a total pioneer,
And
and
this was the one location, right? At
yeah,
this point.
and there were two
Oh, okay.
because his investors lived in Sherman Oaks,
Oh,
so they
got it.
wanted one close to their house. So there was
Yeah.
West Hollywood, Sherman Oaks,
Got
and
it.
um, I think because I was like younger, wide-eyed, passionate, luckily had made money through acting.
Uh-huh.
I just kept pitching Barry and John Rachel Mumford, who were his investors and ran the business day to day. I just kept pitching them on allowing me to sort of join the team, move around, invest. Right, I wanted to put my money where my
Yeah.
mouth was. I wasn't asking for sweat equity. I wanted to earn it and invest and prove its portability and all that. And it took about 5 years of working together, kind of earning their trust, where they finally said, "Okay, let's give it a shot."
So in that sense, those 5 years you were training, were you starting to step into other things too during those 5 years, or were you really, what kind of stuff were you
Yeah.
doing?
Um, so I had heard through the grapevine. Backing up, I knew right away. I was like, if this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, and if this is the vision, like to become a partner, move around and start scaling this thing, I have to learn everything I can about the operations, of which I knew nothing, right? Like at least the teaching piece made sense because
Yeah.
I'm a performer and like put a mic on me, I can
Yeah.
handle a room. And at that point I knew, the ins and outs of how to sort of program a safe and fun class. But the operations was really like what I needed to learn. And it was kind of the last piece for me. So I heard that the GM was getting ready to leave. And it actually took her a little bit longer than expected, which I'm grateful for because it gave me time to go out and I got a job at a gym
Mhm.
and started to like learn about sales, memberships, just their sort of business model and their platform. And when I finally got to interview for the GM role, I was able to sit in that interview and talk about how I might apply some of the learnings from my current role into Barry's,
Yeah.
which was, I think, a part of what got me the job. And I definitely started to do that. We didn't have memberships before I started. We didn't really have like first timer incentives or any of
Yeah.
that.
Got it.
So yeah.
And so you took over GM. Was at that 5 years, like 5 years in, you got GM, or was
No,
that?
no, that was like within the first year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said. Like, I'm sure Barry and investors and everyone, like, when you have someone this passionate about what you're doing, you want to enable them. Like, if
Yeah.
you're a decent, level headed person that is also passionate about what they've created, and you see someone showing passion for what you've built, like, you want to put everything behind that person. I think that's
Yeah.
smart on their part, too. And so you were GM within a year of
Yep.
joining. And so did you spend the 4 years as GM, or wait, tell me about
Yeah.
that
That's
process?
exactly
Okay.
right. I was doing everything. I was doing um, managing the two studios, still teaching a lot,
Uh-huh.
um, and cleaning toilets when I needed to, like answering phones, like doing it all.
Yep.
Going out in the community, like on hikes at Runyon and handing out free passes, and just kind of, it's funny because all of the work. What's so great about being on a journey like this for so long is that like all of the work that I and my other teammates were doing have now been sort of formalized into different
Yeah.
departments, like community marketing and brand. But back in the day, it was just us,
Yeah.
like
That's
doing what
why
we
I'm
needed to
going to
do to
run you.
make it
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
But finding like systems of scale has been like a really interesting and fun part of it.
Yeah. And that's the fun part of growing a business. And so you, so then at that 5 year mark, you, what was the shift? You said like that's when you were able to take that opportunity. Was that when you started expanding it, or what happened there?
Um, what changed after 5 years is that I walked into the office and I actually said, I love this brand. I I want to dedicate my life to growing it, but I'm going to do this with or without you.
Got it.
And that like took a lot of guts because I was
Yep.
a kid, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm sure part of them wanted to like slap me in the face and be like, you disrespectful little shit, but it worked. And they were like, okay. And it was not a bluff. Like I had a whole business plan,
Yep.
and was ready to just kind of move to New York City and open my own thing.
And is that, did you actually move to New York to expand berries, or like and obviously you're still there, so that you ended up not calling your bluff, but going with you. So,
Yeah. The first studio was actually kind of an unplanned. It was in San Diego, and it was because another copycat went out of business.
oh,
So it was like very low capex
yeah.
involvement to it was turnkey essentially.
Did
So
you took over their studio that went out of
mhm,
business?
took
Got
over
it.
that studio. It's still open today.
Yeah.
It was a tough time because it was 2008, 2009.
Oh
So
wow.
the whole world had crashed.
Yeah.
And I would say that that time in my life also gave me a lot of confidence in the business because what we saw year over year while other businesses were tanking was that we were flat instead of
Yeah.
seeing
That's
growth.
great. Yeah.
So I was like, wow, this business is so fun. It resonates with people. Um, and it has like a certain amount of immunity as it relates to recessions.
Well, that's interesting because you would think it'd be a luxury because of just, the expense of it, and like, hey, this is something that like maybe when things are tight, I'll just go for a run outside and not go spend the money. But people hold it so dear. I think that's probably like the emotional connection to their berries workout. It's like I'll cut all this other stuff, similar to like why alcohol goes up and it kind of the adverse effect. But people stick with still spend money on things that make them feel good, even
That's
and
right.
even
And
done.
it's human connection. You're not going
Yeah.
to, in times where you are scared, lonely, losing money, like you're not going to divest in your human connections.
Yeah. Yeah. You shouldn't, at least.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah.
also, I think there's like a little bit of trade down. Like there are people that berries is really expensive for, and maybe during tough times they come less often. And then there are people who maybe go to personal trainers, which cost 3 or 4 times what berries does, and in tough times they come to us more. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I think there's
Yeah.
like,
100%. That makes sense. And so you opened San Diego. Like, I guess, how was that experience? Was that like, did they really give you like carte blanche? We're backing you. We hear you. Go for it. What are you going to do? Or was it
yeah,
like more of
yeah.
like getting them outside their comfort zone?
No, no, it was very much. I mean, they were active participants,
Yeah.
But there was a high degree of trust. I think one of the things I did initially when I first took over as GM, as I saw my role as like really allowing, because the two investors had kids, a family, which like now I can relate to more than ever. I saw my role as like creating distance between them in the day to day.
Uh-huh.
And so that had already sort of happened. And Barry is like the most wonderful human and taught, God bless him, 5 a.m., 6:30, and 8 a.m. for like 100 years every single day. So would show up to work at 3:30. Such a
Yeah.
hard worker, was not involved in the day to day, and
Okay.
had no desire. He's like top billing. You know what I mean? He was like the star and the
Yeah.
heart and soul. And so by the time I opened San Diego, it was, I had already started to create sort of like, there was no instructor training program as an example when I joined.
Yeah.
So when I wanted to become an instructor, I got a call on Friday saying, "Can you teach tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.?" And it was
Got
like,
it.
is someone to tell me how to, so had to create those like systems for training. Um, and at the time we were developing our franchise business,
Mhm.
which helped because when you create, those
Yeah.
texts, a big part of it are the training manuals.
Yeah.
So that was kind of happening at the same time. So when I opened San Diego, it was like my first chance to like test all of these training programs, and
Yeah.
it ended up going really well.
Yeah, how I was going to ask, like, how was that experience? Was it like, was that, and like, once you did that, was like, okay, now we need to take this everywhere? Like, was it immediate, like, this is going to be, we need to go big, or, oh, there's some hard parts of this that we need to like take a beat and really figure this out?
No, it was like I'm ready to go big. I think
Yeah.
um, I loved the brand marketing piece,
Mhm.
identifying berries in a new community, not only through partnerships and paid opportunities, but also through community and
Mhm.
just defining who we are. And then the other piece that I have been connected to and loved so much is just finding and developing superstars,
Yeah.
which I would call one of our core competencies
Yep.
and has really helped us last. We're going to have our 27th birthday this
Wow.
fall. So,
And how old was it when you joined?
um, 7 years.
Okay. So you've been 20. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, and so, yeah, where'd you take it from there? You opened San Diego. You've now got
Yeah.
brains. What? How did that look?
I opened Chelsea next in New
Yeah.
York City, and that was, I would say, the like beginning of the rest of our lives,
Yeah.
because up until that point, Barry's was 1,400 to 2,000 square feet, a toilet usually located in the studio, like in some
Yeah.
corner, obviously with walls around it, but still, like
Yeah.
if you went, everyone knew.
Yeah.
Um, and that was it. A really small lobby, maybe a couple racks of retail.
Yeah.
Chelsea was a completely different vision. I, at this time, noticed that the landscape wasn't like necessarily becoming crowded, but there were definitely more competitors in the market. And we were kind of going into New York as the new kid on the block. Soul Cycle had been there for a couple years and,
Mhm.
was born there. So that was, a meaningful brand to people. And so I felt like we had to step it up a bit. And we came up with the fuel bar. My husband and I, he's a chef, created all the like recipes in our house, and had dinners where we shared different ones with friends and figured out what the best ones would be. And fuel bar was really meant to be obviously a place where we could fuel our clients after class, but
Mhm.
also a space, a third space, if people want to stay, crack open their laptops and just hang out.
Yeah.
So big community driver, which it ended up being. And then we added, locker rooms, showers, and Chelsea's also where we started our like amenities program. So I uh, had met a couple, gay couple in the neighborhood in Chelsea, and they had started a brand called Malin and Getz, which is massive
Yeah.
now. But that was our
Yeah.
first, sort of amenities partner. And so all of this was really new for us. And um, Barry's Chelsea still remains our number one studio in the world today.
Wow.
We had not anticipated the level of success we were going to see. And by like the third month, we were at beyond year three in terms of like
Wow.
our projections.
Yeah.
So it became really clear like the 3,000 square foot model was not going to work in New York. So we took an adjacent space and knocked it down,
Wow.
and it's now like 6,000 square feet. Now we usually sign, 45 to 6,000 square feet.
Yeah. Got it. And so again, going into the ramp from there, obviously, like that's a huge success. Did you immediately go for like, okay, where are the next 5 locations? Like, how are you thinking about it in terms of scaling this?
I'd say at that point, I was kind of living, I was supposed to come to New York for 6 months, the same way I did to San Diego. My husband stayed in LA because he had restaurants there. It ended up being more than 5 years,
Oh, wow.
because I was kind of living on an island, in New York, literally, but also figuratively as it relates to business, and had all of this control. Um, and so I, was very focused on growth. So rather than like making distributions,
Yeah.
to all of us partners, I just continued to reinvest everything I could into expanding the brand in New York City, and then also fairly quickly into the Hamptons.
Hmm.
I really learned about the like, um, brand
Migration.
opportunity there. It's never really been like an EBITDA generator, but it's a great way to get in front of the right people and create new
Yeah.
habits for people who haven't been.
Hmm.
So I grew New York City in a very accelerated way.
Got it.
Opened Tribeca right after NoHo. Given there was already an industry by that point in time, it wasn't that difficult to observe where the low hanging fruit was, because you just
Yeah.
knew like where the other players were, how utilized their studios were,
Yeah.
and so it was fairly easy. Wasn't groundbreaking to like
Yeah.
develop the strategy in terms
And were
of
you really,
real
like you
estate.
mentioned Soul Cycle, was that really a competitor? Because I know, like, going into a spin class versus going into like for a full body workout or, berries is very different. Or were you actually seeing people pick one or the other?
Um, Both, as
Yeah.
well as seeing people pick both.
Yeah.
So, like, you'd see a lot of Soul Cycle gear in a berries class and vice versa. And
Yeah.
so, what you can obviously deduct from that is like there's market share, right?
Yeah.
And even though you want someone to come 5 times a week, they may actually be coming two or three and going to a couple different places the other day. So, I think even when it doesn't seem like there's a competitor, um, it's all about market share, wallet share. It's
Right.
I would say even like at this point in time, fitness is competing with recovery. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
people are going to spend a certain amount of dollars and time,
Yeah.
and if you have 90 minutes, you're either going to do the like you know spa membership you have, or you do your cold plunge and your sauna
Yeah.
and blah blah, or you're going to go to a class or the
Yeah.
gym or whatever it might be.
It's
Does that
fair.
make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. No, the time thing is, and I think that's just become more real and real in our society these days. It's like everyone's
Yeah.
so on time. It's like, I'm doing this. Uh, and so, you expand through New York. You spend 5 years there. Then how did you start thinking about it? Was it like, now we need something in every major city in North America, or like what was your sort of concept of how this thing? And did you have that ahead of time? Did you like have a plan of like, we're going to do New York, then we're going to do these places, and did you stick to that? Like, how did that whole plan look?
So New York is actually, by 2014, it seemed fairly obvious that the landscape was crowded.
Hmm.
We had like copycats in certain cities that were opening. Um, there was, I'd say, like a new interest in boutique fitness globally, which didn't exist before. Um, America's always sort of like at the forefront of fitness, and setting the tone for the rest of the world. And that started to become, I started to notice like studios popping up in countries that didn't have it previously. And so I knew we really had to ramp our engine for growth. And up until that point, Barry's had only like it was all funded by us founders. I'm referred to as a founder, even though I wasn't there from the very beginning, but we were funding it all, right? And so I knew either we needed to do like a small raise or go the private equity route.
Hmm.
And we ended up doing the latter and
Uh-huh.
partnering in 2015 with a group called North Castle Partners,
Mhm.
who had actually taken Equinox from, gosh, less than 10 to 42 units, and had a lot of experience in fitness. and that's not easy to find at that time in private
Yeah.
equity. So, best partnership of my life.
Yeah.
It just
Which is
actually,
rare to
and
hear with private equity. That's
no, it was like it was incredible, and it was like the partnership experience of a lifetime. And it just ended last month, but they really, were responsible for bringing Barry's from 12 to 15 studios to we're at 90 studios today.
amazing.
And so all of the sort of um, building the infrastructure, the team, HQ, our systems to scale, our development strategy, all of that was very heavily informed by our partners and our board. Um, and it just was great. It was like the best private equity story ever.
Love it. And so, a couple more questions for you. Number one, well, actually, just to tap into that, you said it ended a month ago. Did you guys partner with a new private equity firm and they sold out? Like,
Yes, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, standard pipeline. Is that
Yeah,
announced? Is that all out and
yeah,
done?
it was announced. Yeah, and it actually wasn't standard because they usually hold 5 6 years,
Yeah,
and we were getting ready to hit the market in January or February of 2020.
got
So
it.
it's really bad timing. So
Good
they
on
had to
them to
hold.
be patient, though, like to wait
What
another
was
five
that?
years. Good on them to be patient to wait
Oh
another
yeah,
five
they
years.
they're just the most stand up humans. But yeah, it
Yeah,
was that had to hold another 5 years after that.
yeah,
So we had to
got it.
rebuild the business essentially.
Who's the new partner?
Princeton,
Okay,
Princeton Equity
cool.
Group.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, the couple more questions. Number one, what's next? What's next for Barry's? What's next for you?
So we have a fairly aggressive growth plan ahead of us. We're aiming for a dozen new studios this year.
Wow.
And then next year, we're going to take it up a notch and do 15, and we'll probably do that for the next 3 years.
Mhm.
Um, that's sort of Princeton's end goal is around 4 to 5 years. So we plan to open 60 corporately owned and operated studios
Yep.
and 20 additional franchises. But part of the transaction last month was actually a full consolidation of the UK, Canada, and the US. So
Got it.
now they're all corporately owned and operated.
Yeah.
And so those 60 new corporate studios are inclusive of those three markets, those three countries.
Is the
Um,
majority of those domestic, or are you going like a lot more aggressively international?
I would say the majority of those are domestic.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Um, and there's something else I was going to say. Oh, in terms of where we're opening next, like in the US, we have a combination of what you would imagine just like dense urban infill. So
Mhm.
think, Hoboken.
Yeah.
Um, uh, we just signed FiDi, which is really exciting. We have Williamsburg coming up. We have Long Island City. So a lot of growth here in New York
Yeah.
City. Not necessarily like all on the island of Manhattan because Barry's is a place where we really value scarcity. And the last thing we want is for it to be like super easy to get into every class.
Yeah.
So we're really sort of, being deliberate in where we go and why.
Yeah. Makes sense. And so, last question, and this is, I think, a good question for you because as someone that you didn't start this and go through the trials and tribulations of the beginning, you jumped into something someone else built that you were passionate about, and then ended up being earning the ability to run it, which is, I'd say, harder. Like there's hard things about starting something and hoping it catches on, but then you're already at the top and you stay at
Right.
the top as long as you want to. You earned your way to getting them to want to hand you the reins of their baby. What would be your advice to someone that uh, either you got or you wish you got that allowed you to sort of achieve at that high level that you would give to another person that wants to achieve their dreams?
Um, I'm a big believer on not allowing fear to control your life.
Mhm.
And the most successful people that I know are able to, you can't control being scared and fearful. It happens and it will always happen. But if you acknowledge it and recognize it, you can easily sort of move past it. And I'd say that that is probably the best advice. I didn't always do that in my life. And if I had, to the extent that I do today, I would have moved much faster through the world.
Mhm.
So I always say replace fear with focus. And a big, I think, tool to help with that is actually meditation.
Mhm.
And we have, our executive coach helped to kind of integrate meditation into varies at the leadership level. We do it every leadership meeting. We start with a three
Love it.
minute meditation. So, big fan of that.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Well, Joey, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on Hawk Talk.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.